Hey, welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to talk about what I kind of feel is maybe my number one outside the box kind of trick for using compression to really kind of add a certain nice quality. I say nice, that's subjective, but a certain nice quality to our tones. Now, this trick may not be what you want for every preset, but just knowing that it's there, knowing how it works, and knowing kind of what the outcome is of it, we will have that as another tool to be able to kind of throw in if we kind of, in the moment, desire this little type of sound from our compression. All right, so without further ado, let's go over to HX Edit. So you might be wondering what I'm talking about. Well, firstly, this is a little trick that I kind of talked about maybe 2 weeks ago in a video that I was talking about if we can change the feel of the Helix. And I kind of touched on it, but I thought it might be kind of cool to dive into a whole video. Now, a lot of folks who watch my channel know that I'm really kind of known for always having an LA Studio comp at the end of the chain just to compress the signal slightly. Doesn't matter that it's after the time-based effects such as reverb and delay, that's okay. I'm not using it to squash the sound, but just to kind of give it a little bit of, I don't know, like character to the sound. And the LA Studio comp is wonderful for that. For this though, I'm gonna just turn that off because we don't want to, I'm also gonna get rid of the delay here. We don't want to have that kind of playing around with the sound of the other compressor I'm gonna use. So right now what I do is I have my template here that I normally use. I shut the delay off, shut the compressor off, and I just threw in a Matchstick Channel 2 amp in here to sound like this. Didn't really play with it too much. I think I might have changed the microphone or whatever, but sounds fine. It's a tone. So a lot of times we'll go and throw a compressor before, but for this example, I'm going to talk about using any of the compressors we have here. We'll start with the Deluxe comp, and I'll throw that up there. Now, a lot of times what we'll do is, if you just want a little bit of control over the peaks and whatnot, we might set a fairly low ratio, maybe 2:1 or 3:1. We might set a attack time, at whatever speed we desire, and same with the release. Some settings like this, maybe even 5 milliseconds there, mix it 100%, and then sort of watching on my gain reduction meters. Way too much compression at that point, so I'll just bring my threshold up. I just kind of want that to kiss the sound a little bit. Now without that on, now that's adding a lot of makeup gain, so I'm just going to bring that down because I'm probably only getting a couple dB of gain reduction. So that's maybe a traditional way we might set that up, and there's nothing wrong with that. But one way that I like to do sometimes if I want something a little bit different and a different way to control the sound is I will use something we call parallel compression, and that's really the number one trick that I'm talking about. I mentioned in the video about the feel of the Helix, something called New York style compression, and a lot of New York engineers, recording engineers back in the day used to do this with drums a lot. They would take like an 1176 style compressor, set it very extreme to the point where it was even just distorting and crapping out and, by itself would sound bad, but then they would mix that in with the dry signal just underneath to give it some character. Sometimes they'd even process that compressor differently, possibly EQing it differently or what have you, and it was a lot of really neat tones. So I thought it's kind of an interesting trick to be able to use on guitar as well. So the way we would do something like that is we could come up and set like maybe a really high compression ratio, 10:1, 20:1. Go down with a ridiculously fast attack time, and then set our threshold. So it's really squashing in a way that maybe is too much. And then what we do is we simply come in with our mix control. Just gonna bring this level down a little bit here. And we just roll as much of that kind of ultra squash tone. We just roll in as much or as little of that as we want. Now, if we turn that off, we want to make sure to get these kind of at unity gain if we found the settings we want so we can compare the two sounds. So here it is without. I find it just compresses in a pretty different way. We still have a lot of that unaffected dry signal coming through, so our dynamics still breathe through. But what happens, we get a little bit of that over-compressed sound underneath. Now that might be too much for some. I'm kind of trying to put it at a point where we'll actually hear what's going on. Bring up a little bit more gain on that, or level. You can really hear it there, and you might find at 50% it's way too much. So what we do is we can bring that down, even something as little as 10%. It still retains our tone, but it kind of adds this nice kind of a different feel to it, and we can use that mix control to just dial in and out or as much or as little of this as we want, right? And we remember, if we go to 100%, what we have here. An ultra squash tone that I'm not overly crazy about, to be honest with you. But something down here, you know, we're actually blending in that unaffected signal with some of the compression. Now, it can work really nicely with other compressors too. We get something like the red squeeze on, which would normally be put before the amp, but again, we could mess around and try things we wouldn't normally do here. Set this sensitivity. Get some more gain into that. You can hear it does some weird things, but again, now let's bring that. We can bring as much or as little of that as we want in. And probably not exactly at unity gain there, but so again, it might not be for everybody, it might not be for every situation, but if we find that sometimes we're using compression, we don't like what we're getting out of it, this might be just the trick to get us to a point where we can control the compression in a much easier fashion and get better results that we want. Another one that works really nicely for this is the last one I'll take a look at, is the Rochester compressor, okay? And let's bring this down to like a 1 millisecond attack, let's say. move that ratio way up. Let's see what else here. Whoops. Get that threshold. Very squashed, but again, you're not mixing the level control down. Again, it's adding a lot of gain because of that gain control being pushed up. Try to get them a little closer to unity gain. So there's without the compression. Maybe a little more than that, go up to about 15%. Touch more level on that. So again, very different sounds and another different way to approach compression that'll give us a way to kind of, you know, just sneak it in a little bit. And everybody's gonna have different preferences with this. Some people hate compression, they'll never use it, and that's fine, right? Other people like it. I just find it's a great way that we can kind of adjust the feel of the tone we're playing. I'm not talking about the feel of the Helix or anything, but just whatever tone we're playing. If there's, you know, if we experiment with this a little bit and kind of learn in advance what the qualities that each compressor adds when used in this manner, and we know that's a sound we're looking for, we're going to be able to access it. So just a slightly different thing. There's some subtle things going on here. I mean, some of them, you know, especially if we don't match the sort of bypassed sound at unity gain with the compressed sound, we can't really compare the two accurately. We're going to hear if we hear a volume jump in one, we're going to think one is better. But we want to go more and listen for how the attack of the note changes, especially since I'm setting the attack times kind of fast. It really kind of bites down on that initial transient of the note, but because we're using the mix control, we're still getting the direct signal with that transient. So it's kind of an interesting blend that you won't really get out of using a compressor in the normal way where the entire signal is affected in that way. So kind of a neat thing. You could also accomplish this by pulling it down onto a parallel path, but again, not really much point in that unless we wanted to process just the compression in a different way, which is another option too. But for now, we can just use the mix control. So I hope that was useful, guys. I hope you could actually hear the subtle things I was talking about in there. And I hope it's something that'll open some doors for you to go experiment with your tones and using this kind of parallel style or New York style compression, if you want to call it that. All right, thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I hope that was helpful. Please like the video and share it with anybody who you think would get some use out of it. And please subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. I will be back really soon. Thanks so much again for tuning in. Ciao for now.